Coming up, 3D gun printing is here. Should we be afraid, or is this just the price of progress? YouTube pilots a subscription video service. Should all the big networks be quaking in their boots? Microsoft plans major Windows 8 updates with what's called Blue. But is it too late to save that sinking ship? All that, a lot more on this episode of Downloaded. Hey, welcome to Downloaded. This is the show where we gather the most opinionated voices in the tech field today and focus all that energy on the stories that are impacting our tech world. I am your host, Jim Louderback. Joining me today, I'm super psyched to have Martin Hitch, CEO of Bossa Nova Robotics. Thanks for joining us. And I'm also super psyched to have Bob Suicide back. Bob, thanks a lot for coming back. We got tons of great stories to talk about, so we're going to jump right into it without any prelude or anything. We're going to start off with 3D printing and guns. About 100,000 downloads already for this 3D printed gun. The plan is to print it with your 3D printer. Really, really interesting out there. All right, first of all, Martin, should we be worried about this?
You know, so the first bit for me is when you look at people 3D printing, I'm like, why can't we 3D print a politician who can pass legislation to actually manage this?
Yeah.
Because, you know, that I think is what the fundamental problem here is, like, are you giving people access to technology that allows them to create something that harmful with zero regulation? I think you've got to be a little concerned about it.
But
you know?
Look, can technology be even constrained by politics? I mean, Bob, you couldn't put anything in a 3D printer that says, don't print a gun. What, don't print a slingshot? Don't print a trebuchet?
No, I think you know, as we've seen in the past couple of days, they're sort of cracking down, and they're actually going to set some precedents for how they're going to regulate this kind of stuff, because the problem that they really encountered was the international downloads. So on that end, so it'll be interesting to see how that comes out in the long run and how they're able to police it in that way.
Yeah, but technologically, how do you do it? I mean, how do you keep somebody from printing a tube that hurls a projectile?
I don't think that you can to a certain extent, but I also think that that particular question puts us in a very difficult position. I mean, there are many things that I have access to that I can make and that I can buy that are dangerous if, you know, used incorrectly. And for the one person who does use it incorrectly, we shouldn't limit everyone else who's using it properly. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, you know, I had a copy of Steal This Book when I was growing up. There were things in there that I probably shouldn't have known, but I still did it.
Did we? I suppose you could also argue that all this information is available online to create other equally as terrible items.
Yeah.
You know, I think the
like
one
the
example,
pressure cooker bombs,
the pressure
right?
cooker Boston bomb is a great example. It's like you can already do it, and this is another version of that. It's like, I think to your point, you're not going to stop it, you're not going to prevent it. You hope common sense prevails somewhere along the middle, and not everybody's going to go out and do it.
Yeah.
But
well, I also thought it was interesting that yes, it would be great to be able to control this, and you know, so the follow-on story, the State Department said, oh yeah, you take it down, but it ended up on Pirate Bay anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's not really much you can do. You can't really control the free flow of information in many ways, right?
I think the concern is more about, I can take this through a metal detector and it won't get picked up.
Yep.
You know, and that then suddenly becomes a really, really significant issue. It's like, it's not the fact that it's available for download, you can do it at home, but now I can carry it onto an aircraft. You know, and the only thing is a firing pin, which I'm sure I can disguise in any other you know, piece of thing in my luggage. It's like, so that I think is the bit that needs some type of review. But
there's a lot of things I can sneak through a metal detector, though. I mean, at a certain point, it's like, which do you sort of regulate first?
Yeah.
The TSA and how they do their checks, or the technology of the gun that can make it through?
Yeah. Look, I just think that it's the genie's out of the bottle on this stuff, right? It's scary, but we're going to have to deal with it. I don't think government is going to be able to do much to get away from it, to get us away from it.
I mean, they haven't been able to do anything on most of the gun issues, so why should we expect anything different now?
Yeah.
Once it's on Pirate Bay, it's all over. Hey, let's move on to our next story. YouTube changing the game this week as well. This has been rumored. Everybody sort of knew this was going to happen. Subscription services coming out. Some of their top clients, they didn't open up to everybody right away. They just said, hey, we can create a channel, make it subscription only. Anything monthly fees from, I think, about 99 cents up as far as you want to go. A couple of launch partners, Sesame Street, Nat Geo Kids, the guys, our old friends at some of the news sites decided to do it. I think it's interesting though. Yes, people are doing it, putting it out there, but first of all, you know, what do you think, Bob? Is anybody going to pay for this stuff on YouTube?
I don't know. I mean, I think yes, because there's already sort of a market for it. We have Netflix, we have iTunes. People are sort of used to paying for television. But YouTube as a service has sort of always been free, and there's a lot of stuff that I can get on there free that I'm not necessarily supposed to. It's easy, and so dependent upon how they're going to be able to police the rest of the free version of the site, I mean, I don't know if people are really going to be able to see a value in it.
Well, it's the value that's important, right? So if somebody like UFC, the Ultimate Fight Club, was doing something, and yeah, you can lock some of that stuff down because they get paid for that stuff elsewhere as well. But the idea of, I'm going to put, you know, Sesame Street in a paid area where it's probably available for free as well. I don't know, Mitch, do you have kids? Or Martin, do you have kids? Would you pay for that?
So I do have kids, is the first thing, and they do watch YouTube, and they seem to be able to navigate and find content that seems is applicable to them or appropriate to them. I just think it's, you know, this is inevitable, really. It's been coming for a long, long time. It already happened in the music industry. It's inevitable. We've been resisting it, you know, in TV and film, but with things like Hulu, with Netflix, it's already happening. And all this is saying now is you can get really niche and pick the content that you want. You know, it's the ultimate on-demand, isn't it? Right. I can now go on. My on-demand currently is kind of dictated. Now I'm going to have this plethora of choices of on-demand. If I can navigate through it, that's always my issue with YouTube, is that how do you find anything on there anyway?
Well, the other side of it is it's a one-to-one thing, right? You've got to subscribe to this channel, then this channel, then this channel, then this channel. Whereas what we've seen in a lot of these services is just give me this all at once,
Aggregate it,
I want Rhapsody to get all the music, right? I don't want to have my rap channel that I pay $1 for and my jam channel that I pay $10 for or whatever. So, you know, Sirius, who I pay, you know, $10, $20 a month for, gives me this great, vast source of music. So I wonder if people are going to subscribe to a lot of individual channels, or if maybe one or two and then everybody's just going to go for the free stuff.
There's also an issue with the fact that there's a lot of users who don't want to have multiple subscriptions across the board. If I want one service, I need to go to Amazon, and if I want another show, I need to go to Hulu. And so, you know, you get sort of subscription fatigue from having to go to all these different places to get what you want.
Yeah, that's something my friend Jeremy Toman's building this app called Digit that's designed to sort of fix that. And it's the other problem is you have all these different sources, you end up paying for it, then you don't know where you can find that piece of content at the lowest price. Like, yeah, Survivor, I want to watch Survivor, but yeah, I've got it on my DVR, I don't know that, and I end up spending $5 for it on iTunes. I should know that I can get it for free on this other thing I'm paying for, so that's an issue too. The other issue I have with the YouTube stuff is that the amount of money they're charging for it. So if you're a creator now, and what I believe is, they haven't actually told me this, but you know, the standard split on YouTube is something like they get 45%, you get 55%, but that's when they host and they sell ads for you and they do all this stuff for you. If they're just creating an environment that's paid where you can put your stuff up, they're still taking 45% of that subscription revenue. I think that's wrong. What do you think, Martin?
You know, I think Apple take 30% through everything that goes through the App Store.
And they got ripped to pieces for 30%.
Right, so I think you've got precedent there. 45 certainly seems to me like it's being gouged. Yeah. And I think what the knock-on effect for me has got to be the creators of that content and the producers of those channels are going to have to, if they're sacrificing that much revenue, then what are the production values that you expect in it? And you're just going to end up with crap content, basically. It's I think that's got to be the knock-on effect if they take too much, is that it'll backfire because you'll just get really, really poor quality product.
Or people will end up charging too much for it, and your subscription fee is going to be $20 a month, and no one's going to pay it. But that's what you need to recoup your cost to create great content.
And one of the big motivators for me is that I want to pay for a subscription to something that I want to support.
Right.
And if I have, you know, if I know that most of that is going to YouTube, I don't really want to put my dollar there.
Do you want to put more money in Google's pocket? I don't think so, right? So look, this is the beginning. And you know, YouTube is very good at trying stuff and adapting it and changing it and seeing what's going to work. I think the interesting thing about this is, where does it go? Let's say they're successful, right? Let's say they're able to create an environment where cable operators then say, you know, I don't need cable anymore. You know, it's Discovery, puts all Discovery Channel there and says, I don't need Comcast. Not that that's going to happen, right? But let's say that could play out. Could this be the end of cable and broadcast?
Man,
I mean, part of me wishes it would be.
Yeah,
you know, it's like, don't you always begrudge that cable bill? It's like, please, like, give me a better service than I currently get right now.
I have to imagine that they could find a way to make themselves relevant in a new field, but maybe not cable as we know it now. But I think that they could offer some sort of premium content that would make you have to continue to have that connection to your television. And you know, if that's where Game of Thrones is, that's where I'm going to go to get it. You know, so.
Well, here's the other thing I want them to build. I want to build a Kickstarter in there so that you can say, oh, you know what? I want to go cover E3, but I don't have enough money. If I could raise $5,000, I could go cover E3 and put it out there. And if people donate it, you get that amount of money, and then you go and do it. And so that sort of temporal-based stuff I think would be really interesting, as well as windowing. So it's free for a week, and then you got to pay money for it, or you got to pay money for the first week, and then it's free. So I think those are areas we could build out that might help it be successful. What do you guys think? Would that work?
It might. It depends on, you know, back in the day when cable used to offer like the Disney Channel for free for a week, and I just videotaped all of those and never got the subscription. So, I mean, I'm that guy who I'll find a way around it and sort of abuse the intended purpose, but I think that it does help to drive subscribers, and there is a market for that. Yeah,
I think, okay, so like, let's close the story out and we'll move on to the next one, but Martin, how much are you going to pay on YouTube subscriptions next year?
You know, I'm pretty satisfied with my Hulu and Netflix subscriptions right now, and I'm like, I'm not looking for that super niche content. Would my kids take, you know, like access to content A, B, or C? Yeah, I mean, but it could end up being $5 a month on it. You know, it's like, I don't think it's.
What do you think, Bob? Too much. What are you budgeting next year?
I actually might have to end up budgeting quite a bit because Discovery is on it and things like that. I'm a huge.
Well, we're not on it yet.
Yeah. Oh, really?
No, we're not. We're not doing anything yet.
Oh, okay. I
say yet because we may experiment with it.
I thought you guys were, because I was reading that a bunch of documentary people had signed on, and so that's what had me hooked. So if not, then no.
But the documentary guys.
You don't want Sesame Street?
I want the other PBS.
Are you going to pay for Elmo? There you go. How about you guys? Are you guys going to pay for Elmo? Let us know in the comments, and we'll find out whether Elmo is going to be making money on YouTube. Let's move on to this next story. I think there's been a lot of talk about Google Glass recently. A lot of backlash, you know, it's showing up in the men's room. We don't want it in this bar. We don't want it in this place. Really interesting story by our buddy Peter Shankman, who said, Robert Scoble, who came out and said, I love this thing, I want it everywhere, it's the best thing ever, I'm never going to go anywhere in my life without Google Glass. He says Robert Scoble is going to kill Google Glass. Just like Shankman said he killed the Segway. And there's this little picture of, you know, of him like on the Segway running around. It's really interesting. Oh, and then he points to this next thing, which is funny. He said Robert Scoble wore Google Glass in the shower. Took a shower with Google Glass. And is now scaring everybody away from it. Can geeks kill a product by making it too geeky, Martin?
You know, so I suppose this is down to no publicity is bad publicity at the end of the day, is it? It's all about getting out there and getting the word out there. And, you know, I think can geeks kill it? I don't think they can kill it, but can they make it feel so geeky that it's applicable to only one minutiae audience? Possibly, you know, so maybe that's the way that's the knock-on effect. I don't think it's going to kill it. I think it will ultimately end up a ubiquitous device in iteration number X. I'm not too sure, but it's going to get there eventually, I think. Okay, you guys, look at this picture, though. Come on, this is going to scare you away. Look at that. That's going to scare anybody away from Google Glass. I mean, that scares me from the shower.
I actually thought it was kind of cool that you could take it into the shower.
It's water resistant. I don't think it's waterproof.
But that still seemed kind of cool that, you know, if it's raining, it's going to be fine. I mean, it costs so much money that it's nice to see that it is fairly resistant.
So here you are in the shower with your Google Glass.
It's not something I would do.
What are you watching?
But the good news is it's looking out, isn't it? Maybe it's recording the outward view as opposed to at least looking in. I mean, that would be terrible.
Oh, man, Robert looks way too happy in that shot. But let's go back to the Newton, right? I mean, the Newton was the geek. I mean, I was at the launch of the Newton. I remember flying out on a plane from San Francisco to Boston where they launched the Newton. I sat next to this guy who's at Apple. He said, yeah, we're super psyched. We like spent all this time. We created a coffee table book about the launch of the Newton because it's going to change the world. And I was like, wow, you haven't even released the product yet. You have a coffee table book for it. And all the geeks loved it, but then Doonesbury got a hold of it and it was dead. Yeah. So is that going to happen with Google Glass?
I don't think so.
No,
I think it's too much like the phone, the way that we have apps now on the phone, and it brings the combination of phone and internet and all of that into something that really feels like the future. It's right in front of your face. It's everything that people, when they think of sci-fi, they want. It's tech savvy and it's the new sort of hype thing. And our generation is so into that now that maybe this is more prototype. And it's being done, sort of geeky, high-level kind of things. But Oakley will come out with a version of it. Everyone will wear it, and it'll take off.
Or Warby, the Warby guys. Yeah. The Warby guys will do it. And they'll make it cool.
Yeah, hipsters will put mustaches on them, and everyone will want one.
All right, Martin, what's your take on Google Glass?
So I think it's, your reference to the Newton's an interesting one because that to me was just ahead of its time. It's like you're asking people to make a fundamental change in their habits. Whereas today, we already live by mobile devices. We're expected to be surrounded by technology. We're expecting an easy access to communication, to information, and glass just brings us one stage closer to that.
I think it's the infiltration of privacy, though, that I think people have the most issue with. It's don't bring it into my bathroom, don't bring it into my bar, don't bring it into my place where I'm doing something I don't necessarily want people to record what I'm doing.
And it's interesting. A restaurant not far from here. I was in Pacino about 2 weeks ago, and there was somebody sitting at the communal table wearing glass. And at that point, I thought that's fairly, I feel that fairly invasive into my dining experience when somebody is essentially sitting across the table, and you've no idea what they're recording and what they're not. So at that point, you feel like, that's gone one stage too far for me. But I'm also a different generation. When I look at my 8 and 9-year-old kids, I don't think they have the same privacy concerns that we have, and I think they grow up in a world where they're just expecting everything to be available. So they'll be the people that will force its adoption and force its development because they don't care. They don't have the same concern.
If somebody at the end of the table were holding up a phone,
you wouldn't think twice about it, would you?
Would that bother you?
I don't think you'd think twice because you're used to that.
But if they were holding it and recording it?
You may turn your head because you're like, I don't really want to be in somebody else's video, but I don't think you get up and move away from the table. It's like, oh, okay, you've taken a photograph over here. And I think it's just because you don't really know what it's doing.
Right. Well, and I think we need both, and I think you're right, we need both the social conventions to take your hat off when you come into the building.
Yes.
And you need the sort of societal aspects to change, which is, you and I will be probably a little bit less likely to embrace it, but Bob and our kids and, will probably be a little bit more likely.
Exactly.
I do think, though, that the Newton thing is really representative. It's early. It's too early. This version is not going to be successful except for people like Bob Scoble. But it will be, the concept is absolutely going to be successful. And we will in 5, 10, 20, I don't know how many years, there will be a layer with internet layered on top of it in front of us that's always with us. And that's going to be an amazing thing. Yeah. I cannot wait for that world to happen. I am not going to wear Google Glass. Let's move on to our next story, which is Facebook. So Facebook buying, looks like they're in due diligence, one of my favorite companies. You've used Waze, right?
I love Waze.
So Waze is this GPS service that adds community stuff on top of it. Yeah. It tells you how to get from point A to point B with mapping, but it also it uses other users to tell you where the traffic problems are, where there's a cop with trying to see whether they can pull you over, where there's an accident, and it's actually helped me get from point A to point B much more rapidly, especially like going to LA, where I can never figure out how to get around LA. It works really well. Facebook's now going to buy it. You're a big fan, Martin, of it. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
I think there's two sides to me. Waze is successful because it's crowdsourcing information. So by the very fact of that, you need a lot of people using it.
Right.
So if a relationship with Facebook means that you suddenly force this adoption of this app, what it will do is make it more effective and more efficient, not only in our neighborhood, but across the states. I mean, we have an office in Pennsylvania. I go to Pennsylvania, I switch Waze on, and it says 25 people are using Waze in your neighborhood. I'm here in San Francisco, and it's like 3,500 are in your neighborhood using Waze. So the integrity of the data improves the more people are using it. So if Facebook means, hey, all these people are going to get it, and that makes it better for you and I using it in the car, we get better information on it, that for me is the best thing. Do I care who that information comes from? No. I mean, that's why Waze is successful now. I don't need to be connected to them. I don't need to have a relationship to them. The most important thing is that they're just feeding information in, because that makes the service better.
Yeah, Bob, what's your take on Facebook buying Waze?
I mean, just to speak to your point that you're adding users. Well, if Facebook is forcing this on users, internet trolls are not the best people that you want using this service.
Yeah, that's true.
And
that's true.
I can see it going very poorly, very quickly.
A lot of garbage in, garbage out on that one, right?
Because I mean, right now, people that are using it love it and want to use it and want to help the community and really sourcing the right information. Whereas if you force it on all of Facebook's users, everybody's just going to go crazy on it, and it's going to just undermine its core use.
Really good point. I hope that Facebook doesn't force it on people, but I do see this when you look at Facebook coming out with their phone OS or the updates to the phone OS, trying to compete with Google. This gives them a mapping source. So now, if you think about it, if we're moving towards the phone not as just a window into the information world, but as a window into the social world of information, well, now they've got your friends, now they've got maps, because maps is one of the biggest things we all do with our mobile devices.
Yeah.
It kind of, I mean, this is like, and this is what the All Things D story said, it's like Google and Facebook going head to head yet again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, are you guys worried about or excited about this as a dramatic incident in our lives?
I don't have a lot of faith in Facebook. And I think if Facebook going head to head with Google, I don't think Facebook's going to win on this one. So I just sort of see it as like,
so you think Facebook's going to screw it up, right?
Yeah, I don't see it as being this sort of, mashing of titans, and I think that it's going to end poorly.
Taking all the drama out of this, but no,
I know.
But actually, you're not, because it's going to end poorly. You're right. It's going to end poorly for somebody.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. To be honest with you, it's like it's so far away from their core business.
Yeah.
They've already demonstrated they haven't got the traction on the phone. It's like what they were expecting from that phone hasn't worked. So if you're looking at phone, you're starting with an iPhone, or you're looking at a Nexus, or you're looking at HTC. You already have providers who do that really well. And this just seems such a big step away from what's core to their business that it's like a land grab. It's like, we need to have something.
I see it as being strategic. I see it as a way for Facebook. Look, they bought Instagram. Photos are a big thing we do with our mobile devices. Buying Waze, mapping is a big thing we do with our mobile devices. I just see this very clearly, that they want to dominate the phone, and maybe they're playing catch up a little bit. But I'm a big fan of the Waze product, and I think that it may really work for them. We'll see. All I can say is, I hope they don't screw it. I hope you're wrong. I fear you may be right. But as a fan of Waze, I hope you're wrong.
Let's hope it doesn't change the app. That's the thing.
I think you said something really spot on, is that they're playing catch up. I think that's a lot of what Facebook does, is catch up. So they haven't ever sort of been on the leading edge of anything. And that's what makes me think that way.
Well, time will tell. They haven't even bought them yet, so they're still in due diligence. But boy, good for the Waze guys. I was there when they launched, and they're the nicest group of people, and super psyched. They built a big company.
It's just a great product.
$1 billion payout for that, which would be great. So let's move on to our next story, and this is more of a trending story that, Martin, particularly you were tweeting about a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago or whatever, and you've talked about a lot. I thought it was an interesting angle, that robots are not killing jobs. Now, everything we've heard about robots is that they're on the assembly line, they're replacing maids, they're replacing assembly line workers. But you were very positive about this, as this Georgia Tech professor as well, who was interviewed by Steve Cherry over at IEEE, say it's not happening. This is false. Talk about it.
One, thanks. So this is like a topic dear to my heart. So it's and basically because this is a space in which we play. It's
right.
So the key bit for me is the belief of what a robot can do versus what it can really do in reality is like night and day. Hollywood has set us up for, we have we've got a view of what a Terminator is and what C-3PO is, and the reality is we are light years away from actually having technology that can deliver that. So if you look at what robots do now, they do really niche pieces. They can't do 100% of anything. So if you take car manufacturing, where they've essentially, that's where the most adoption of big commercial robots, they take on the really dangerous jobs. And I think if you then look at dirty, dull, dangerous as the sort of three categories.
Dirty, dull, and dangerous.
That's really where you'll see robots working. And they're not, by the very nature of doing dirty, dull, dangerous, they're taking on an element of a far bigger construction job or a far bigger service job. It still needs people to be involved. So what it does to me is it just changes the role that the human plays in that particular instance. So, you know, no longer are we exposing people to things that are dangerous. We're now asking them to essentially manage a set of machines that's doing the dangerous job, and we're able to put them into areas that are way more effective. Like, we're so much more dexterous with what we can do with our hands, with how we can look. You know, the fact that we can see in 3D. It's like, come on! It's like the things that we do that technology's so far away. It's like we will force a re-education of the workforce, which has been happening for decades anyway.
So, but culturally then, Bob, why are we so, not me or you, but why are so many people so afraid of robots?
I think that it's that sort of unknown other, and the more that we've sort of made them like ourselves, it becomes that, like, at what point does it become sentient? Does it become humanity and then turn, so you can see that sort of struggle between, is it smarter than me? Is it better than me? Is it somehow like diminish me as a human being? And that's where you get really good sci-fi stories from. But I think, to your point, I mean, it does more to better mankind to build more robots. I mean, they do very niche jobs, like you were saying, but the number of people that go into designing and building, you're making the jobs for humanity more intelligent and more thoughtful rather than grunt work. So it seems like it's bettering humanity to build more robots.
Yeah, I agree with that. Look, and whether it's the Roomba or going in and diffusing bombs or going into Chernobyl or one of the nuclear power plants, it's great. But you know, Martin, you guys are kind of building more personal robots, right? I mean, you're building robots that you want to put in people's houses and have as companions. So you're not, you're doing different stuff.
So the reality for us, though, is there's an education process that, you know, the population needs to go through, because we have this Hollywood view that it's going to come in my room and kill me. And I think that's the uncanny valley. It's like, I've seen robots that are designed to look like people. I've seen robots that are mimicking people, all pre-programmed. I mean, there's nothing sentient there whatsoever. It's like everything is essentially pre-canned and scripted. The way that I look at it is the job that we have as a business. So we're building robots that are designed to interact with people. But by interact, I'm not necessarily driving intelligence, but I'm understanding what you're doing in front of me. And if you wave your hands, then I need to know that that means stop, or this means come towards me. So we have some intelligence, but I'm not able to, and I can make a decision based on a prescribed decision tree. I can do a little bit of online searching to pull information which might help me in that decision. But can I get into a 5-level deep dialogue? You know, that's really hard to do. So the way I think about it is, when we look at what we're doing specifically, we look at initial deployment of B2B environments. How do you expose people to a robot in an environment where it's safe and comfortable? You're not asking people to go straight to the home, because you put it straight in the home, and I think that's the bit where Hollywood's already played that thing of it's going to kill me one day. So I want people to, can I walk through a retail store and see a robot doing something that may not be selling me a product, but it may be helping in the way that Kiva is moving fixtures around in a warehouse to actually service, pick, pack, and ship? Do I get exposed to that so that when, hopefully 3-5 years down the line, where I now have a robot that can help you in the home, you've already seen it for 2 or 3 years in other deployments that are around you, but not necessarily interacting directly with you. And I think that's the education.
Yeah, I agree. And look, and let's face it, for Hollywood, I think we've already replaced robots with zombies anyway. So,
and I mean, to the point of education, I mean, what we've seen as far as the average person with robots is Deep Blue and Watson.
Right, chess playing robots.
Yeah, they're sort of
more of a robot. That was kind of more about just a computer.
A computer, a supercomputer.
But still, these like things that are better than us.
Yeah.
To your point, I feel inferior because these robots are going to take over, and I'm just going to be drinking beer all day. That sucks.
The average person sees.
That's exactly it. That's why the education's there.
Yeah.
Plus, no one's spending millions of dollars on a Watson to put it in their home. I mean, it's now when you go to.
But with Moore's law, they're going to get that.
Eventually, Moore's law will get there. You're right.
Let's move on to our next story because I want to talk about another product that is in a little bit of a problem, which is Windows. So Windows 8 comes out, has this brand new interface. You got to have touch to use it, but none of our computers have touch, and so a lot of backlash on this whole Metro thing and whether you can actually use it or not. And so they've got a new version coming out, as they do. Microsoft has a new version of Windows 8. I think it's called Blue or something like that. And looks like they're backpedaling and adding features back in. Is this, Bob? Is this a bad thing for Microsoft? A good thing, or is like who cares?
Well, I'm sort of torn because part of me feels bad for them because they have this sort of diametrically opposed group of people that they're trying to market to. A lot of their core users are older. They like the mouse and the keyboard. They don't want to give it up. They want Microsoft as they've always had it back in the day in '95, and they don't understand this new interface and they don't know how to use it. But yet they want to be leading edge. They want to have the touchscreen interface, and so they're sort of fighting amongst their users and who they really want to market to. And then part of me is sort of like, did they really just insult every consumer and call it a learning curve problem?
Yeah, right,
that everybody is too stupid to use their product, so they're dumbing it down, and how dare you? And they seem to have that problem with their marketing, that they're just really not in touch with the words that they use and how it insults their consumer base.
Well, I think the biggest problem, to your point, is that, people are used to the mouse and the keyboard, but the thing is they built something that works really well on touchscreens. Touchscreens aren't that, I mean, it just doesn't work on most of our computers. What do you think about, Martin, about the fact that they tried to build a single OS and interface that worked across everything from the smallest smartphone to really the biggest TV? Is that the right thing to do, or should we be building different interfaces for different screen sizes?
So I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I think the tweaks that they're talking about right now, the benefit of the doubt for me is that they're listening to user feedback and they're responding to user feedback, which is probably what their competition's been doing for some time. So that's really, accepting that they're no longer necessarily the ultimate dominant force in the marketplace, and they have to pay attention to the consumer. But I also think that moving across, trying to develop a sort of a consistent experience across any mode is the right way, because that ultimately is what we will start demanding as consumers. We had an interesting discussion with their robotics group because they had Robotics Developer Studio, which was essentially based on the old Windows kernel, and that also moved to Windows 8. And they, some time ago, they said, "Hey, we just got to give you a heads up that everything's going to Windows 8." So I think that in the long term will serve them well, that it becomes the same consistent system throughout.
Yeah.
They've got
in the short term, though, it's kind of an issue.
So the short term, here's a great example. This happened to us just this week, which is, so we run Linux and Windows on our robots, depending on what environment we're in. And when we boot up a Windows robot, people know it's a Windows robot because it takes so long to boot up. And so that for me is still like the biggest issue here. It's like we are getting so spoiled in on-demand computing that you want it instantly, and it's like we turn it on and you can see we're having a dialogue and we're sitting there, and suddenly this thing decided it had booted up 3 minutes after we turned it on.
Look, kudos to Microsoft for actually putting some effort into it and going to do it. We'll see how it goes.
Keep working
I don't want to go to Windows 8 yet just because I don't have a touchscreen computer.
Right.
I like the interface, I just don't like using the interface with what I have. We have time really quickly for one more story, and I want to talk about this one, Bob, because you were practically crying about this when we talked about this. You're a big World of Warcraft user. World of Warcraft losing 1.3 million subs. Is this the end of World of Warcraft?
Dear God, I hope not. I mean, all of my friends say, Warcraft is going out, it's dying, and I'm going, no, from my cold, dead hands. I don't want them to ever stop. But they're still the top of their field. They're still completely relevant. Every MMO that comes out is still being compared to Warcraft. I think they are at a certain point where they sort of need to retool and rethink about another expansion or how the world changes in order to keep subscribers interested. But I mean, I'm a huge diehard fan. There's nothing I could say that isn't, you know, it should keep going. It can. It just needs some help. A lot of the people that left were overseas, and they've had a weird relationship with that market anyway. So that's how I'm rationalizing it in my head.
So in other words, you'll be like the last user, just like the ElfQuest guys, right?
We turn the lights out.
Is this a Blizzard problem? I mean, Martin, what do you think? Is it? I mean, there's a life cycle here, right, for everything.
That to me is it. It's like at some point everything has its day and everything sees its course. And you know, I think the Activision Blizzard world will come up with something new. They've been at the forefront of so many developments like that. And if you look at, you know, their whole universe now, outside of Blizzard, look what Activision's done with Skylanders and how it's turned that into $1 billion plus franchise. It's like, as a business, they will come up with something that's next. But I think what they've got to do now is compete. You know, Star Wars: The Old Republic is a free-to-play game.
Well, look,
Old Republic went free-to-play because
it wasn't getting the traction. But now you've got great production that is free, and I think it just maybe forces a switch. But
well, here's the thing I want them to do. So I was a big fan of the Warcraft games early on, played through all of them. Hadn't really played World of Warcraft, just wasn't my thing, tried it out, wasn't really that. I want them to reinvent the Warcraft franchise as the next big thing, maybe with Google Glass. What do you think? But that's all the time we have for today, so thanks a lot, Bob. Thanks a lot, Martin, for joining us.
Thank you.
That is it for Downloaded. If you have questions or comments, or if you have any idea of what you want them to do with the next version of Warcraft, reinvent it down below, and we'll all make millions of dollars. Until then, you've been watching Downloaded. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Level 1.